Chapter 1. Liore. Tativika, Israel, August 15th, 1992. Once pristine, olive-colored skin has now become dull and pale. The shine from her radiant black hair has lost its luster and hangs in thin strings across the young woman's sullen face. A shadow of her former confident self, Liore Nadav, has become nervous and jittery as the voice of an ancient creature eats away at her sanity. The constantly nagging voice in her thoughts torments her daily and urges her to seek out a man named Riccolo Tomahen in Florence, Italy. Vaguely, Liore recalls having heard the man's name come up in conversations with Professor Daniel Elazar, her former mentor at university. Beyond that, she cannot fathom why her cerebral tormentor wishes so badly for her to find him. Since the excavation of the ancient city of Meshaluas and the sacrificial pit of the serpent god Nyarlathotep, where the book of the Black Earth was found, Liore has been hearing this otherworldly voice and been unable to strike it from her mind. Prescription psychosis drugs, neither alcohol nor therapeutic assistance, could explain or cure her of the agony. Riccolo Tomahen, Florence, Italy, the voice repeats. Your destiny begins there with him. Liore digs her nails into her scalp, screaming loudly as the blood begins to run down her cheeks and neck. Why, she wonders, is this voice in her head? Is something within her brain damaged, causing this phantom to manifest? Or is it something darker? Being down in the sacrificial pit, standing on the millennia-old dried blood, being surrounded by the bones of so many victims, could something have followed her back? Has some evil spirit, haunting the pit, attached itself to her? Riccolo Tomahen, Florence, Italy, the voice says, undeterred. You will become queen of this world. All men will bow down before you in subjugation. Countries and armies will burn in your wake. Fear and unfathomable power shall be your legacy. Queen? Liore laughs in tears. A voice inside my head promises me a crown. No, there's nothing wrong with me at all. Florence, Italy, August 23rd, 1992. Liore staggers into the office of Riccolo Tomahen, barely able to function. The days have been unkind to her, and her mind is constantly ravaged by the phantom voice. Her body is haggard from lack of grooming and proper rest. A single loud growl rumbles from her digestive tract, drawing the uncomfortable glances of the businessmen and women gathered in the lobby. She can feel their eyes upon her, judging and demeaning, but her purpose is greater than their condescension. An end to the tormenting voice looms so close that Liore's determination is fanatical. Nothing can prevent her from accomplishing this task. Riccolo Tomahen, Liore breathes in a heavy rasp, yet her eyes are aflame with a longing for relief. She paws at the arm of the nearest man who pushes her away in disgust. This is no gutter, the muscular, gray-haired man says, mistaking her hunger for one of a different sort, more commonly encountered. Dismissively, he waves her out of the office and calls for several armed men in security vests. You can sleep off your addiction elsewhere. Liore wraps her fingers tightly around the man's throat, while the security officers raise their handguns in alarm. Shaking and coughing for oxygen, the man lifts a hand to stifle their actions. How can I help you? a deep voice asks her, striding into the room from an adjacent hallway. Dressed in a crisp and expensively tailored suit, Riccolo Tomahen has a strong presence about him. A trimmed goatee and small mustache line the angular face of the well-built man in his late 30s. His French is thick, but Liore's travels abroad have required her to be fluent in 9 different languages. If it's money you need, I will give you as much as you can carry, if you will just unhand Stefan there. And then allow my guards to sink your filthy carcass into the sea, never to be found, he thinks. The voice, Liore says, straining to speak as tears sting her eyes. It led me to you. Said that you can help me. Riccolo frowns with annoyance. You are beyond my help, if voices are urging you to attack respected pillars of the business community. Liore's grip tightens with strength beyond what her light weight and small stature would suggest. As the man begins to lose color, Riccolo becomes more cooperative. Yes, your wonderful voice. What exactly did it say you needed my help with? With a shove, Liore releases her hold on the man, and his face bounces off the nearest polished and expensive oak desk. Cocking back the hammers of their weapons in unison, the guards prepare to shoot on their employer's orders. The voice told me that you would be able to make me a queen. Riccolo's demeanor changes, unnerving Liore, as she suddenly realizes the man has been toying with her. With a flick of his wrist, she is thrown to her back and skids across the floor. Red eyes now replace brown, and Riccolo grins as a thick, inhuman aura pervades the room. Perhaps your voice is no friend, Riccolo hisses. Perhaps it has led you here to me to be slaughtered. Shaking with terror, Liore crawls backwards, but is blocked by several of the office workers. Their calm attitude suggests they are fully aware of their employer's nature and are not concerned in the least. Does this voice of yours have a name, my dear? The only name it speaks is yours over and over, she cries. Inyana, the voice interrupts. Tell him your destiny lies intertwined with that of Inyana. Inyana, Liore whispers. It says my destiny is tied to Inyana's. That bitch? Riccolo laughs. Inyana has been queen of nothing but dust for 10,000 years. He moves to a glass cabinet, locked with a numerical keypad. After several strokes, he withdraws an ancient amulet, adorned with small jewels and encased in gold. It is obvious that the decorations were added long after the initial creation of the object. This is your Inyana, queen of the paperweights. Liore steps closer, as if drawn to the amulet. You know how to free her spirit, don't you? Inyana was a ruthless monster. Why would a nice human such as you ever wish to unleash one of her kind upon the world? The fear of the voice continuing to plague her for the rest of her life seems motivation enough for Liore to do almost anything. Relief, she says. I wish for the voice to leave me and never return. Riccolo moves to her side in an instant. The woman is unable to even see his action. Extending his hand, he helps the terrified Liore to her feet and gently brushes her cheek. She cringes at his ice-cold touch. If you go through with this, the voice will not be the only thing inside of you to never return. I don't care about the price, Liore says, grabbing his wrist forcefully. I will pay it. A sinister grin snakes across Riccolo's face. Then tell me a little bit about your family." A mountain of skulls obstructs her view. These are not the bleached and polished variety, but rather are brownish-colored bones, laced with bits of bloodied flesh still clinging to them. The stone floor is cold and wet with gore. A single hole, carved into the ground for drainage, prevents the cavernous room from overflowing with the spilt life liquid of thousands of sacrificial victims. Liore stands before the newest sacrifices, dressed in a ceremonial robe that leaves her breasts exposed. Blood lies smeared across her neck and her chest in ritual. No, her face is different, she thinks as she sees the woman from across the room, and not herself. Red eyes appear within the drainage pit, as black serpentine coils slither in the darkness beneath the temple. This isn't me that I'm seeing. You are my priestess, now and forevermore, the serpent hisses. Even in death, you will continue to serve me. Blessed is the name Nyarlathotep, the priestess chants. Blessed is the father of dragons, and the mightiest of the fallen, Sain She Shala. Blessed is Sain, the Lord, God of all, Nyarlathotep hisses. I glorify thee with the blood of my servants. The smell of death is overpowering to Liore's senses, making the images seem so realistic to her. Bile rises up in her throat, and the acidic taste burns as she chokes it back down. Eyes tearing up, her nostrils begin to run with a steady flow of watery fluid. As she walks, she is forced to alternate between the cold stone floor, caked in dried blood, and the soft bits of human meat, freshly taken off the bone for the ritual feast, to follow after the sacrifices are completed. Older corpses whose flesh has not been fully stripped lie in a pile at the far side of the chamber. Their graying color and putrefying stench is such that the serpent Nyarlathotep will no longer accept them as viable tributes. Some of the decayed flesh of multiple bodies has begun to meld together through a sickening process of rotting and mold. Thick clouds of flies swarm the piles, feasting and reproducing in a near-endless cycle of life among the dead. Carrion beetles burrow through the bodies, chewing out tunnels to lay their eggs within. Outside the temple, wild dogs howl and scratch at the walls to get into the awaiting feast of the macabre. Another, the phantom voice of what the priestess has been raised to believe as that of their patron god Sain, echoes throughout the chamber. She's troubled that her god demands another tribute of life. 4 strong men of excellent standing in the faith have already been given to the serpent today. The population of their small city already dwindles each year compared to their neighbors, who more and more have begun to adopt the monotheistic religion of a being high above in the stars. As if reading her mind, the voice answers, I must become stronger. As the other religions swell with followers, my power wanes. Would not increasing our numbers with more of the faith also strengthen you in the same manner, my lord? She asks. She knows she is bold, speaking out of turn to the god, but her concern has grown so that she can no longer contain her feelings. My strength does not increase in that fashion, the voice growls, neglecting to mention why. It is because Sain is merely a banished Yazata, and not truly divine. He cannot gain power from worship as a true god can. Only the blood of sacrifices can strengthen him beyond the normal means one can gather power. With enough strength, he will be able to reach across the great divide between himself and the other worlds, much the same as his voice can now be heard by humans after years of sacrifices performed by his faithful servants still free. The serpent creature in the pit stirs. Existing as an extension of his master, Nyarlathotep's stomach acts as a pathway to transfer the vitality absorbed through the blood of sacrifices to Sane himself. Each victim devoured by the serpent gives the former Yazata more power and elevates him closer and closer to his goal of true divinity. It is his belief that all gods were once lesser beings, raised to a higher state of existence through the blood and sacrifice of their followers. He wonders how many of his brethren Yazata were slaughtered like lambs before the altar of the Almighty before he became what he currently is. Was his own creator once nothing more than another overly ambitious, yet ruthless Yazata? Grown from Sane's blood before his sealing, the serpent acts only through the will of his creator, with one mind, and an insatiable hunger for human sacrifice. Angered by the insolence of his priestess, an invisible hand strikes her across the face, causing her to nearly topple straight over the edge of the serpent's pit and into the darkness and awaiting jaws below. Blood runs down her lips and splashes onto the darting tongue of Nyarlathotep below, who erupts into wild excitement. Her vitality is among the greatest he has ever tasted. Her will is fierce, and she is full of powerful life, spending far too much of his strength just to discipline his acolyte. Sane is pushed back into near dormancy. Unable to even extend his voice across the numerous worlds between them, he is left to hope his command has been made clear enough. "Come," the priestess says to one of her personal guards. The man is darker-skinned, nearly charcoal in color, with bright eyes and an equally fierce will. For years he has served her well and protected her from many assassination attempts from rivals. It is your time to give yourself and become one with God. The guard, named Davmid, is hesitant and doesn't immediately move. He has never been among those who truly believe in the faith. No god he would ever want to worship would feed its people to an overgrown worm slithering around in an awful-smelling pit. Davmid's fingers twitch, gripping his spear tighter. The two-handed weapon extends almost double the young man's 6-foot height, and the stone tip is over 2 feet long itself, and carved as sharp as any metal ever before seen in their city. He's a proud warrior, and has a high value of his own life. As the most important figure in their city, it is the duty of the guards to protect the priestess, and keep her away from any harm. A short glance sideways to his fellows reaffirms his own fear. The other guards also appear both nervous and unsure of themselves. They do not know if they could truly act against each other should the priestess order such. "The great serpent awaits your sacrifice," she says, extending her arms high above her head and twirling in a circle of mock ecstasy. She has become a convincing actress over the years, embellishing the delights and pleasures of her god, in order to fool others into giving up their lives. Why do you hesitate? The pleasures of this flesh pale to those of the world beyond in the bosom of our God. "My name is Davmid Dinley," the guard boasts, pounding his spear against the stone floor and slapping his other fist hard against his chest. "I am not food for a creature that crawls upon its belly." The priestess lowers her arms, looking at her guards with a mixture of pure shock and the pain of betrayal. "You dare defy the will of God? Lord Sane has ordered you to give yourself to him." No god that I would ever serve would order my death, Davmeed shouts, extending his spear towards the priestess. I have killed for you and your god for the final time, witch. The priestess lets out a long sigh before refilling her lungs with the energy of all living things around her. The life forces of the guards themselves, the flies, the beetles, the wild dogs, even the mold and bacteria growing among the decay, infuse her with power. Her eyesight fills with magic, causing everything to shimmer with a supernatural glow. Flames roll in her stomach and churn as they build in strength. Fire rises in her throat and explodes from her mouth, consuming Davmeed. The guard screams in agony as the magical flames cannot be extinguished, no matter how much he rolls and flails to put them out. Another guard rushes to assist in his suffering, but the flames spread to his fingertips and up his arm until he too is crying out in agony. My strength comes from God, the priestess declares, flames still spilling from her mouth and sizzling on the floor. Sheens of sweat cover her nude form, transform her hair into long black tangles of wet rope. Defy Lord Sane, and you will be unworthy of tribute. The blackened form of Davmeed drops to the floor and breaks apart into ash. This is what happens to those who refuse to submit to the will of God. The other burned guard is held up by his fellows, having severed his arm before it spread too far to be contained. Do any more of you dare stand against the will of Lord Sane? If so, please speak up now. Confess your sins, and you will receive a merciful death. The terror inflicted by the priestess is chilling and real, despite her having difficulty believing in it anymore. Sane does not truly bless her with anything but the ability to kill. Her magic is learned and laboriously practiced. She accepts this role of Deathbringer, having long ago cast off the remaining shell of her conscience. The priestess brings many sacrifices to the serpent, and earns her own reprieve from death each day. She knows her own usefulness will one day wane, and it will be her throat that is cut open and drained upon the slab. The serpent will feast upon her flesh, and the dogs will gnaw on her leftover bones. Any price. I said that I'd pay any price. Liore's chest heaves between hoarse cries of agonizing pain. On her hands and knees, the young woman is covered with bleeding sores and knife-inflicted slashes. Only a vessel who has experienced true misery and pain can hope to contain the essence of a devil or Sakari's spirit, Ricolo says. Inyana's spirit is stronger than most. Likely, her power will evaporate your soul and leave you a burned-out shell. He laughs, kicking her in the ribs and lifting her off the floor. Your own soul must become tempered like any fine blade. If you do not wish to be consumed, your soul must become stronger than the flames. Liore forces herself to stand, but Ricolo pushes her back to the floor. You do not have what it takes. Lord Sane has chosen Inyana's vessel too hastily. Sane? Liore asks, looking up through the bruised and swollen eyes. Is that the name of the voice inside of my head? If you survive, Inyana shall give you the answers you require. Ricolo grabs Liore by the throat, punching her repeatedly in the chest until her bones splinter and crack, and her body becomes soft and pliable. He tosses the woman to the ground, where she does not move or make a sound. You are not getting off that easily. Ricolo grins, holding out a hand and healing the damage done to Liore by calling upon the Yazatan master marks for spirit and dominion. Coughing, Liore awakens with a flood of pain that her nerves remember despite the injuries being reversed. Each time one's body experiences a taste of death, it will struggle to improve upon its flaws in order to avoid such an experience again. Humans are incredibly adaptive creatures, far more than you even realize. Because your kind is so frightened of your own mortality and death, you never discover that dancing upon that precipice is what unlocks true strength. The more one courts demise, the more they learn her tricks. Riccolo grabs Liore's arm and swiftly kicks her in the chest, tearing the limb from her body in a gruesome display. Blood sprays across the room, drenching everything in a macabre painting. Liore screams, going pale as she bleeds out in seconds. In order to master death and overcome it, your body must know all possible experiences of pain and suffering. He grabs her by the hair and pulls her up while at the same time using his other hand to push the rest of her body downwards until the muscles in her neck rip apart like snapping rubber bands. When Liore's head finally dangles in Riccolo's grasp, dripping blood steadily to the floor, he laughs before tossing it onto her lifeless body, and again calling upon the highest Yazatan magic to heal her physical body and pull her spirit back into the flesh to undo the damage inflicted upon it. "Please stop," Liore screams, at once experiencing the pain of dismembering and decapitation, minus the relief that comes at their completion. "No more! You are nowhere near where you must be to survive Inyana's soul being infused into your body. The sheer pain alone will shut your mind down. Without your complete consciousness working in tandem with the incoming spirit, your body will be destroyed beyond even the abilities of Yazatan resurrection." Liore drops to her hands and knees, tears of agony streaming down her cheeks. No wounds are present, yet she feels each muscle and tendon in her neck being stretched and torn. Even my ability of Dukan Helias Ahura cannot heal a body whose spirit has been consumed by another. Inyana's power is so great that a weaker soul will break apart just in her presence. Without your soul still anchored in your body, her spirit will burn it to ash and leave it unusable to either of you. Liore is unable to focus on the majority of his words. All that the woman can focus on is the excruciating pain. Riccolo becomes angered when he notices she is not paying attention to his wisdom, and kicks her in the face as hard as he can. Liore's neck snaps back until her head touches her shoulder blades. Her body is lifted into the air with such force that it crashes into the ceiling and becomes caught in the light fixtures hanging down. Sparks and glass shower to the floor. Riccolo sighs as he looks up at the mangled body hanging down from above. "So easily broken," Riccolo whispers, using his power to lower the body back down to the floor. "Fragile and beautiful. It's no wonder so many of my brothers lost their grace, just for the chance to become intimate with your tragic forms." His thoughts drift to the primitive women of the past and their animal skins. Dark hair and eyes, tanned skin seem so vibrant and alive to him, holding his allure like no other. Dozens of these human women did he take to know, which only made him desire them more. Riccolo strokes Liore's hair, admiring the softness of it. Her lifeless eyes stare up at the ceiling, while her mouth hangs slack and drooling blood and saliva. The fallen Yazata, once known as Uziel, still finds beauty in the frailty of humans after so many years. With a gentle kiss to her forehead, Liore's wounds are reversed, and the floodgates of pain are opened up to her once more. Liore screams in agony, feeling her neck broken backwards, and her body being jolted by the live electricity of the hanging lights. You will come to laugh at this pain as each experience of death becomes known to you. The saying, "that which does not kill you makes you stronger," could never be more true. Anything less than what you have already felt will become nothing to you. You will take on the fires of Inyana's spirit, and you will not be consumed. Liore ceases her screams quicker than before, and discovers that, as he has said, pain is easier to overcome. "See?" Uziel smiles. "You are already much stronger than before." Without warning, he punches her across the face. Blood explodes from the woman's nose and lips, yet she does not cry out. "What's next?" Liore asks, spitting a mouthful of blood to the floor. "This one may yet actually survive the ritual," Uziel thinks, still smiling. Uziel enters the room, carrying several gallon jugs of dark crimson. "Drink all of this deeply, and do not allow a single drop to be wasted." Gagging, Liore drinks from the first jug and fights to keep the metallic-tasting liquid down. It's thick like milk and smells like rotten meat in her nostrils. Every instinct inside of her screams for her to purge. On her hands and knees, Liore's body tries to rid itself of the entire contents of her stomach. A thick, dark-colored liquid is immediately retched up, splattering onto the floor like smashed fruit. Shaking his head in disapproval, Uziel kicks her in the ribs and flips her onto her back. Liore tries to cry out, but only manages to cough. Holding her side in pain, black spittle drools from the corners of her mouth. "You are a terrible study," Uziel growls. "How is it that you have managed to get so far in your education, being that you are such a slow learner?" The devil in a man's skin reaches down, pulling Liore up by the hair. "These lessons in pain will continue until your body is conditioned to endure the torment. Becoming a vessel for a higher being requires a tolerance for pain beyond your comprehension. If you do not build up a higher threshold, your spirit will be broken apart and lost forever." Liore claws at his hands, trying to free herself of his tight grip. She feels her hair being torn out by the roots, bright red streaks running down the young woman's scalp and forehead. "Maybe it is just inevitable," Uziel says, shrugging. "The soul belonging to this body was consumed in the fires of my possession so long ago that any of its lingering memories inside me have long since evaporated. Should you be destroyed, Inyana won't even recall that you ever existed." Uziel smiles, tossing Liore across the room, where she crashes against a bookcase and collapses to the floor, buried in old books and curiosities collected from around the world. Shrunken heads from a Pacific island, skulls of two-headed animals, an ancient murderer's bones turned into a sorcerer's wand, and dried skins of men turned into writing paper fall around the barely conscious woman. "Do you think that you are the first potential vessel that has come seeking Inyana's container?" Uziel grins as Liore slowly stirs and begins to crawl to her feet. He must admit that he admires her tenacity. Such a lovely prize, like the one I possess, is a draw to all kinds of humans seeking a greater power and strength than that which they can claim on their own. Inyana was powerful and strikingly beautiful. The pathetic apes that first gazed upon her fell down in worship and cast a golden idol of her before them in appeasement. Uziel pauses, wondering what selective process Sane uses to choose who would be a potential vessel for Inyana. He hasn't seen any qualities that would really stand out to mark this woman as worthy in his eyes. In the past, strong and fierce women have challenged him to become the host of Inyana, but none of them have survived past the first phase of the transference ritual. Their bodies were cooked into blackened husks, and their souls were wiped from existence, sent who knows where. Why is it then that Sane has chosen a mere student of the past, barely old enough to drink alcohol legally, to claim what so many warriors have failed to do? Uziel's respect for Inyana is high, admiring her strength and beauty, as well as her renowned intelligence. As a Devilnay and a former Yazata, he still regards the Sakari Queen as an inferior being to his own kind. Both the Sakari and the human species came into existence millions of years after the creation of the Yazata. With such a vast gap of time between them, it is difficult for the Yazata to view any being as anything more than an animal. Many species have come into the favor with the Creator and gained intelligence beyond that of their peers and evolved into the likeness of the Yazata themselves, only to die out in time. No other being is equal to the Yazata and has lasted as long unchanged. They cannot have equals when none can reach their sustained perfection. Among the Anshar hierarchy, or even beings vastly superior to the Yazata, that viewed them as inferior, as they do the humans and other species. Above the Yazata are the sentinel-like seraphs, who exist only as guardsmen, the most important places that not even the Yazata are allowed access. Unlike the Yazata and all beings below them, the seraphs are unable to naturally reproduce, and exist in a fixed number. As many as were created so now exist. The higher beings seem more artificial than the Yazata, like rough attempts at life that did not quite achieve the intended result. The Yazata exert free will, and though immortal by natural means, may still be killed by violence, and do not possess normal souls. The devil known as Uziel still remembers the sights and smells of his home long ago in Anshar, before he so foolishly followed the general of the second choir into battle against his brethren. When Sane was cast down to earth and continued to build his rebellion, Uziel again foolishly followed. Humans and other creatures weren't worth granting intelligent speech and thought. At the time, preventing this seemed like a great cause, a cause greater than any other. Elevating the monkeys to their likeness seemed blasphemy that could not be tolerated. They did not deserve to imitate the Yazatan cultures, to learn their language and magic. Speaking out against the Creator is akin to an all-out defiance, and dissension is not tolerated. Had I but kept my opinions to myself, Uziel muses, reflecting before the moans of Liore snap him out of his contemplation. The young woman leans against the wall for support, blood hanging down from her lips in strings that stretch down to the floor. If you've had enough, just say so, and I can cease your suffering. Uziel raises his hand, manifesting his energy and condensing it into a sharpened point around his arm. He molds and shapes the energy with his concentration, transforming it into a physically existing weapon. It may be better to die now than to fail and be consumed into oblivion. Killing humans has never been a problem for the devil, Uziel. In his earliest centuries on Earth, after the defeat of Sane, he and his cohorts were disfigured into monsters, and his anger at the humans was immense. In them were reflected both his ultimate loss and regrets. The hatred of the humans was so great that he took delight in hunting and torturing them. It was not uncommon for Uziel to pursue a single human for days, giving them small glimpses of himself as he slowly pursued them. Sometimes he would stalk a small group, often a family unit, and pick them off one by one. As their numbers dwindled, and they lost those whom they loved the most, Uziel would feed on their despair and fear. The feeling of terrorizing humans was invigorating, and he felt a certain justice with making them suffer for his fall from paradise. Over time, his hunts needed to become more of a challenge to be as satisfying. Participating in every major war across the world, he could hunt and kill without ever worrying about his true identity being discovered. The centuries and millennia passed, and so did much of Uziel's anger. Realizing that no amount of human deaths would return him to his place in Anshar, he relented to live out his time in their shells and experience the world as they did. Wearing out dozens of hosts, he has lived this way and begun to care less about slaughter and mayhem. The fresh blood on Liore's face and the anguish in her eyes rekindles the passion long dormant within his core. The contented beast now roars and yearns to inflict more pain and feed off of her suffering. "Liore!" a woman cries loudly. Liore's eyes snap open to see a woman in her 60s, chained to a chair inside the basement of Uziel's office building. The owner stands behind the woman, grinning. Bruises cover the woman's wrinkled skin. "Mother?" Liore cries in agony. "What have I done?" "This is your coronation ceremony, my queen," Uziel mocks with a half-bow. "This is what you came to me for." He tears open the woman's blouse and places the amulet between her breasts. Chanting, the amulet begins to sear into her flesh, and she shouts out in pain. "Endure it," he commands. "Do not be weak now." "Liore, help me," cries Kiana Nadav, her face red and swollen. Liore stumbles, leaning on a wall for support as she moves closer towards him. "Let her go," Liore pleads in tears. "You cannot receive the spirit of Inyana unless you take the life of your kin. If no blood relation is sacrificed, the bond will be weak and able to be severed. Your spirits will not resonate, and in time, they will destroy each other." Dropping to her knees, Liore screams in grief. She is overwhelmed by her emotions. Kaina is not only her mother, she is her friend, and the closest person to her in the entire world. She wishes for no harm to befall her mother, but the urge for relief from the voice of the black god plaguing her every thought and tormenting her is too strong. She wishes for the sane to leave her forever and allow her suffering to end. "I am truly sorry, Mother," Liore cries, grabbing the ceremonial knife and moving closer. Memories, as a child playing in the kitchen while her mother cooks, fills her mind and causes her to scream loudly in anguish. "I am damned." Kaina thrashes against her restraints in a hysterical panic. The look of absolute terror distorts her face, and an unfathomable fear overwhelms her as she is unable to comprehend her situation. Her own family, an idea that is supposed to represent safety and love, now approaches her with murderous intent. Seeing the red grime of older victims on the blade causes her to lose control of her bowels and again scream loudly for help. Uziel cups his hand tightly over her mouth. The strong stench of rotten eggs fills her senses, and she vomits. Unable to expel the contents of her stomach because of his hand, she is forced to swallow it back down. "Just do it already," Uziel orders. "If you do not go through with it, I will kill you both. You've already wasted far too much of my time." Liore kneels before her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Shh, Mother. It will all be over in a moment. I've already killed before. I killed Professor Elazar. I snuck into his hospital room like a thief and smothered him with a pillow. His hands clawed at my arms, but he was far too weak to stop me. I am already condemned. Should I allow myself to falter, I will only get myself killed as well." The look in Kaina's eyes is evident. I don't want to die. With a single thrust, Liore plunges the knife to the hilt into her mother's belly with little resistance. She's surprised how easily the blade slides in. Warm blood pours outwards, spilling over the knife and soaking to their elbow her own mother's draining life. I don't want to die either. I'm sorry, Mother. I cannot even ask her for her forgiveness. There is no forgiveness for me any longer. Uziel sets a bowl at the woman's feet to collect her blood. He continues to hold her body still as it convulses with her dying throes. Kaina's skin becomes pale and cool to the touch, before withering into unrecognizable husk as the man chants over her body. The ritual drains all of her spiritual energy into her blood and collects it into a concentrated mass within the bowl. The blood in the bowl glows with a golden hue and hums with power. The ritual is nearly complete. Her life force has been collected through her blood. You have performed much better than I expected you to. Shaking, Liore wipes the tears from her eyes and leaves a red streak across her face. She drops Uziel's knife to the floor. Let's just finish this. Drawing small spell arrays around Liore on the floor, with Kaina's collected blood, Uziel tears open the young woman's shirt and adds the same circles to her chest. He begins to chant in the shared tongue of both the Yazata and the Devilnay, until the blood sigils illuminate and vibrate with energy. You are now ready to become her vessel, if you are deemed worthy, Uziel says, pulling the amulet from Kaina's body and pressing it between Liore's breasts in the center of the spell arrays. He rotates the amulet, which causes the glowing rings to also move like gears. Queen of Averno and priestess of Nylar Throtep, servant of Sane, Inyana, return to this, the Kishar realm. Liore feels the bones in her chest cracking as Uziel presses the amulet against her. She falls to her back and an intense feeling of heat spreads out from the foreign object as it begins to dissolve into a black tar-like liquid and seep into her flesh, becoming one with her. Make it stop, Liore screams, digging her fingernails into her own chest and tearing at her skin until it is covered in blood and flayed skin. It burns! Laughing, Uziel folds his arms across his chest and steps back. You paid the tolls. Why do you now plead for its ending? Suffer through the pain and receive your reward. My reward? Liore's thoughts flash to her mother's eyes, and the look of betrayal, just before the loss of life dimmed them. A darkness overtakes her, and a thick cloud of drowsiness. Each new stirring in her head becomes more sluggish, until it's more painful for her to think at all. She feels like she's drowning, sinking helplessly into a vast, black abyss. Soon only sleep fills her mind, and Liore Nadav is no longer in control. Red eyes snap open, surrounded by black oil that appears like thick mascara. A light, bluish tint shines from her black hair, and curved and sharpened claws replace the broken and faded nails of the archaeology student. What year is this? Inyana asks. Her voice is deeper than Liore's, but still feminine. The Israeli woman's accent is still noticeable. She takes a moment to look upon the still bare-chested and blood-covered body of her vessel. Why have I been placed in this filthy mess? She is barely clinging to life. Inyana sits down on the floor, cross-legged, and meditates, calling forth the healing glyphs for restorative magic. Slowly, energy collects around her from the air, and the wounds on her chest begin to close. You were trapped within that amulet, fashioned by the sages of Katal Takuk for over 10,000 years, Uziel says, bowing to her. Now you are able to move freely inside of this human vessel. You smell like a wet Yazata, Inyana growls before opening her eyes and standing back up. She recognizes the scent of the angelic beings from past interactions with the two rogue seraphim, Cedrion and Gadriel, back in the court of her husband and king, Marduk. It appears that I am unable to fool my lady. Uziel laughs, bowing again. I was called Uziel before the war. I am one of the fallen. Devilnay, I have heard of your kind. Inyana looks around the room with disgust. She glances at the remains of Kaina and scowls. Why have you aided me in putting me inside of a vessel? We all live to serve Lord Sane's will. This female was brought to me by his urging to be united with you. And what exactly is his will for me? Inyana asks with distrust. She knows the stories of the leader of the Yazatan rebels, and how the Devilnay regarded him as a deity. Unknown to her, the god of her own people is but a servant of Sane. Your brother will be revived as well. His vessel is being tracked, and his acolytes are making the preparations for the ritual. Lord Sane has shown these things to me in my dreams. Ymura, the name of her long-hated younger brother, rushes to the front of her thoughts. Sane wishes for me to kill my brother? I thank him for his aid, but the task is one that I will gladly perform for my own reasons. My hatred for that vile betrayer knows no bounds. He will suffer greatly for what he has stolen from me. She thinks of her mate and her 3 offspring left behind in Averno. Even with the slower passage of time, they are most likely long dead in her world by now. Do not mistake his intentions, my queen. The wisdom of Lord Sane is far greater than that of you or I. Ymura must not be harmed. His revival is a key part of our Lord's plans. You must not lay a hand on him. Set aside your vengeance and do our Lord's bidding. Inyana catches Uziel off guard, slashing him across the throat with her claws. Blood sprays outwards, splattering the far wall like some avant-garde painting. The dark blood of a deep arterial wound runs steadily down Uziel's chest and pools around his feet before his head is filled with confusion, and he drops to his knees. For thousands of years he has engineered some of the greatest events of history. He has stood behind the scenes, shaping many a destiny. After a chance encounter with a lowly Sicari-possessed human, he's been felled. Of all the battles he has survived, he cannot comprehend how his end has come so swiftly and unexpectedly. Memories of riding into battle with barbarians while on horseback, the cold northern winds stinging his face, rushed through his mind. Swords clashing, and the crazed spittle of the enemy drooling down their faces into their unkempt beards, and the thrill of cutting through their flesh causes his body to tingle. The smell of cities burning, and the sounds of women screaming in terror and helplessness passes through his mind for one final moment before it becomes too difficult to even think. "What are you doing?" he coughs, holding his hands against his neck and trying in vain to stave the flow of his life blood. Sane is no god of mine. He is nothing but the leader of a group of cowardly birds. If he was a god of mine, he would not have let me rot in that amulet for 10,000 years, while Marduk and our offspring aged and died. She licks the blood off her claws and smiles as she feels an infusion of power from the Devilnay's essence. Not only will I gain vengeance on Ymura, I shall also see to it that Sane's feathered carcass never sets foot in this world or any other. Uziel collapses to his face, breathing his last. A bright white light erupts from his body as his formerly Yazatan spirit passes into the afterlife. The floor is seared with black scorch marks, and nothing remains of his physical body save for clothing. Hearing the explosion, Ricolo's guards rush into the room and train their guns on the half-naked woman. I have slain the head of this house. His swords now belong to me. Inyana extends her claws towards the men. Serve me or die. The guards lower their guns and step aside. I require a bath drawn and fresh garments laid out. Yes, the head of security, a muscular man named Albert Jacot Peltier, says, not knowing what exactly to refer to the woman as. They had only been very briefly told what Riccolo was planning to do with the woman, and a rough idea that she would not be human by the end of it. I am Inyana, Queen of Averno, and soon to be the ruler of this entire Kishar realm, she says with a smile. Drinking the last drop of his coffee, Jake crushes the styrofoam cup in his hand, before tossing it into the waste receptacle as he walks past. The extreme amount of caffeine taken in by the teenager, since his resolution to block any chance of Yamura gaining control, has taken a serious toll on his body. Jake's heart rate is akin to that of a rabbit's, pumping furiously many times faster than is healthy for a human his age, weight, and height. His hands shake almost violently, and his eyes bulge widely. The pull of sleep on him is so strong that he keeps closing his eyes. The pounding of his own heart, however, rings so loudly in his ears that he is prevented continuously from succumbing to it. Fucking tweaker, the man mumbles, pulling his feet out from the aisle as Jake stumbles his way past, back to his seat on the bus, headed to Miami, Florida. He has become accustomed to their accusatory stares, and the insults muttered under their breath. He is sure that in his present condition, he probably does resemble some drugged-out runaway. The drug part is all that separates us, really, Jake thinks, reflecting on the recent turmoil in his life, being accused of multiple homicides, losing your father, coming up short in a rivalry for the affections of another, and becoming demonically possessed would be the cause for anyone to run away and turn to a past from reality in the form of controlled substances. I guess caffeine is technically a drug, he adds, trying unsuccessfully to muster a smile. In my world, the secretions of the seraphim slugs produced a hallucinatory effect. With our superior constitutions, one of your kind would explode from it rather than receive any pleasure, Yamura says, sharing the bulk of Jake's unguarded thoughts. The teen still has not yet mastered shielding his every thought from the prying eyes of the Sakari general, sharing headspace with him. With their spirits intertwined, each is able to see what the other sees, even memories if they are called to the surface. Jake reaches into his pocket and removes a handful of hard candies. Among the individually wrapped sweets are several butterscotch discs, green peppermints, and cinnamon pieces of the sort one would find in the dish of their grandmother's house. He isn't choosy. Any sugar adds its strength to the battle against sleep. Unwrapping several and popping them indiscriminately into his mouth, he angrily responds to his unwelcome cranial resident. I don't care about anything you have to say. I don't care about your LSD slugs, or your royalty, or your fucking family history. You killed dozens of people, and you tried to use my body to murder my friends and family. You would kill me if you had a chance, and not even think twice about it. I'm not dumb enough to fall for your tricks, Yamura. I'm not going to become all friendly with you and let my guard down. We're not going to start braiding each other's hair and painting our toenails just so you can slip in and gain control of my body when my defenses are lowered. Yamura sulks, leaning against a wall in Jake's mind. You will slip. Of that I am sure. As soon as I can get in contact with Scrimauer, I'm going to have that psychotic sorcerer cast a spell on me that'll allow me to shit you out. Jake's image flickers as his concentration is difficult to maintain against the pull of sleep. That, Yamura growls in offense, is not even possible. With Yamura temporarily silenced, Jake's thoughts begin to dwell on his mother. He wonders how she is coping with his running away. Wincing to hold back the tears of guilt and regret, he cannot imagine the suffering she is going through. Her husband is missing. Her son is a runaway, and one of the country's most wanted potential serial killers. Ann Stewart would have every right to be a quivering mess. Jake wonders if she's already taken to drinking, or if she's stopped taking care of herself altogether. My jealousy and anger destroyed my mother. I'm exactly the monster that everyone thinks I am. If I'd just died when you tried to possess me, how many people would still be alive? Yamura glances up, hearing himself addressed in the teen's self-pity. You cannot amend your situation by dwelling on the past. Your foolish self-pity will never amount to anything more than despair. Yumura smiles, baring his elongated and jagged fangs. By all means, though, please continue. Eventually, your pity and despair will cause you to stop caring altogether. When that occurs, I shall gain control once more. The thought of Yumura using his body on another murderous rampage is enough to quell any of his other wandering thoughts. Jake doubles down on his resolve to never allow the creature back into dominance over him. Even boosted by caffeine or other artificial stimulants, you will be unable to resist me for more than another day or two. Sleep is a necessity for your human body. Your fragile mind will collapse, and your spirit will fracture with prolonged deprivation. Yumura holds his hands up in deference and laughs. I will not attempt to stop you, just as I will watch as despair overtakes you. I will bide my time patiently as you try to fight the nature of sleep itself. If I have learned anything from my defeat 10,000 years ago, it has been patience. I have listened to pure silence for centuries, while my prison lay abandoned and buried beneath sand and stone. I have learned to reach an almost hibernated state, while ignoring the passage of time. A few more days are nothing to me. I shall wait you out as a superior predator. Jake cannot help but receive the image projected by Yumura, the large hawk perched atop a bare and almost skeletal tree branch. Below on the ground, a small mouse hides beneath the cover of thorns. The mouse is impatient, and the temptation to move from behind the protection of the thorns is too great. Talons wrap around the rodent's torso and sink into its flesh. Blood drips to the grass as the mouse screams out in pain and is lifted up into the sky. The raptor is infinitely more patient than its prey, a superior intelligence, dictating the outcome before the mouse ever strays from his cover. You're wrong, Yumura, Jake says, pushing the image aside. I'm not like that mouse at all. I've outsmarted you before, and I'll do it again if necessary. The predator only smiles, waiting patiently. Inyana jumps back in alarm as the television set clicks on. A dark-skinned newscaster attempts to speak about a local wildlife sanctuary as a ring-tailed lemur hops onto her shoulder and begins to urinate, darkening her blouse. The reporter screams and begins flailing before the image cuts to a studio audience laughing hysterically. The show's host shrugs with a smile. Looks like she just had a hot news story on her shoulder, the man says mockingly. Inyana looks back to Peltier and Jamie Ronstadt, her two top guards, in confusion. What spell have you performed on me to perform this trickery? Ronstadt presses the up channel button on the remote, changing the station to weather. It is no magic, my queen. These devices are empowered by electricity. Our entire world utilizes electricity to operate our machines and make our lives easier. We do not possess this electricity creature in my world. The few machines that we have are no more than the playthings of Spawn, and operated by clockwork and gears. Inyana takes the remote, begins to scan through the channels. We also have factories to butcher our meat and melt our steel, but they are operated by water wheels and steam. Leave me. I wish to study this electricity further. The men nod, leaving the room. Inyana does not realize that her world uses gears and water-powered technology because the atmosphere of Averno is not conductive to electricity. If any electronics were to try and activate in her world, they would short out and become permanently damaged. The Rigori Seraphim, who retreated to Averno after the wars, learned this after they attempted to build cities and adapt to a life cut off from both the Anshar and Kishar realms. As those early cities were taken over by the advancing Sakari culture, the remaining Grigori retreated to the cold northern regions and took their secrets with them.